thanks so much for tuning in today. It's Bethany, Kristen, Zach, and Dave. We are so excited to have our husbands on here to talk about honest conversations about saving sex for marriage. The reason we thought it would be really cool to make this video is because so many of you have actually asked us, like emailed us, DM'd us, and said, what? You chose to save sex for marriage? Like, all of you? Why did you choose to do that? Was it worth it? Like, that's really strange. Yeah. Weird. And so a lot of you have asked, so we thought it would be great just to have really candid, honest conversations. We don't have a script. We're just going to be chatting and really sharing each from our own backgrounds and stories of like why we chose that. Was it worth it? Would we do anything differently? But I just want to say really quick that if you're someone who has had sex before marriage and you're like, man, I regret that. I really do want to honor God in this area in my life, then we want you to know that God's forgiveness is extended to all of us, that he offers grace and forgiveness, and that any day for any of us, as we've made choices in the past, we can choose today to draw a line in the sand and say, God, would you help me from this point forward to walk faithfully for you and to live for your glory? And any of us can make that choice. So we just want to encourage you that God is in the business of restoration and forgiveness, and that our future can look different than our past.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's just talk about why in the world did you choose to save sex for marriage? So, guys.
The question's like, why are you crazy?
It wasn't because we're not fans of sex. We love sex, but...
I mean, the reason is because God has called us to something in his word that says, hey, don't be sexually immoral. And I have a Bible verse. Can I read a Bible verse?
You can read a Bible verse.
1 Thessalonians 4, 3-5. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his own body or her own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. And so this is one of a lot of different verses in the Bible that God talks about essentially sexual immorality as being a sin. We don't want to do that as Christians, and having sex before marriage is what God calls a sin. And so that's the high calling. That's like the base of what we're doing here. The reason we did that was because God has called us to something greater. So that's the main why. That's the main why. But
I
as
like
far
that.
as intellectually, why did I do that? Well,
yes, exactly. Like bring it down, bring it down.
So, I mean, because that was the idea around the community that we were in, was like, hey, don't do that. That was one of the reasons. Good positive encouragement from those around me. But I think just intellectually, like, I knew just sleeping around with other girls is not going to be that helpful for me. And just thinking about the future, I want to have one person that I'm committed to, and knowing one person is different than knowing 10 people. And it's got to be better. Like, that just intellectually makes sense. So,
I think that's so good. That takes such forethought too. I love that. It's like you have to think ahead. Like, what do I want for the future?
What's interesting about that, especially what you were saying, the scripture passage, is that we believe that God made sex for a reason, obviously. And so when he says, sex outside of marriage is immoral, that's not just a blanket statement because he's God and we got to obey. Like, even though that would be enough, but it's not just that. Like, he's actually introducing these guidelines and these not just guidelines, these boundaries for our good. And so there's a passage where it says he that basically has sex outside of marriage is sinning against himself. Like, he's sinning against his own body. And what I believe, sex is a promise. The act of sex is your body making a promise. And so it's schizophrenic to make a promise with your body without making a promise, a covenant with your mind and your heart. And that actually is disintegrated from what it means to flourish as a human being. And so there's that. A great analogy is, you would think of sex as outside of marriage as more liberating and more free. Like, that's just a typical cultural narrative. Like, I need to be having sex. I need to be letting my body express itself in this way sexually. And in that way, I will be liberated. I will be my truest self. I will be experiencing fullness of life.
Yeah, because there's this idea that to withhold anything is going to be damaging.
That's a false narrative.
Unhelpful.
That's not true. That's just not true.
Yeah.
And just because most people we know might believe it, or most people might believe it, doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
And the reality is, freedom can only be experienced within proper constraints. That's what we believe. You take a fish, is the most free when the fish is in water. I've heard this great analogy, right? Fish is the most free when it's in water. The moment a fish, jumps out of the water onto the land, yeah, you could say, well, it's more free than it was in the water.
It's in the great big world.
It's in the world. It doesn't have the constraint of water, and it will die. Like that, and so God has put these boundaries in our lives and around us, and through His Word for our good.
He made us.
Yeah,
He made us. He knows what's best for us.
It stands to reason that a designer is going to know how best his designed creation is going to function.
Yeah, that's so good. I think
Not to mention, one other thing.
No.
Can I get a statistic in here? There's just studies. Institute for Family Studies. There's some government websites that just talk about how, do you want to be happy in marriage? Well, don't have sex before marriage. Literally, that's the statistic is the more you have sex outside of marriage, the more unhappy you are in marriage.
Wow.
That's just a fact of studies.
So secular
studies.
non-Christian people are saying.
Then they keep studying it because I guess they want a different answer. They're not going to get a different one because what God said has said in His Word is just facts of life.
Yeah, and I think that backs up Scripture in so many ways. Like as Christians, we can have Scripture and then we can also have science. And so often they complement one another, and it's just a reminder that God, like you were saying, God's design is for us. He's not against us. And I think so often we can have this perspective that God is just a killjoy in the sky, right? Like He wants to squish our fun, squish our passion, and give us this bland life where we're just like literally sitting there, not even laughing or smiling. But God is a God of passion, and He created sex, and He created it to be an amazing, beautiful experience, like filled with ecstasy and wonder and exploration. But like you were saying, He's given us a context and parameters where we can actually best enjoy it and thrive in. And so if we even change our perspective of God and say like, wow, God is for this, He's for me, He has a good plan for this.
He's not against me.
Right, then it really puts it in this positive light. And as you're before marriage waiting to have sex, you're not waiting in misery, but you're saying, I'm waiting for something so awesome. And I think that's
better.
the perspective that so many of us have.
Okay. So we're going to have to stop that question.
We've got more. We've got more.
So you have to.
You have to. That one
No. It's a good question.
So now we gave perspectives and thoughts. Was it worth it? Because all of us did choose that. We all chose to wait until marriage to have sex. And so now looking back, we're 6 months looking back. Y'all are 8 years looking back.
Right.
Was it worth it to save sex for marriage? What do y'all think?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I didn't experience anything beforehand, so I can't really say, well, man, that was really good, But I can't say that I would. Man, I wish I'd have kissed more girls. And slept with more girls. Like, no way.
Yeah.
Like I've experienced so much joy with just being with Kristen that I can't imagine anything else.
Yeah.
No, I don't regret it.
Even though we were newbies, we had no experience, but it's been so fun to learn together on this journey.
Yeah, the journey is so fun.
Yeah, it is. And
journey,
within the committed relationship, like the covenant, the promised relationship of marriage, it's just so beautiful because there's that freedom to just explore and enjoy knowing you're not going anywhere. We're going to be together. Whether I'm bad at this, good at this, we can just enjoy and learn together.
Yeah. I think there's this perspective in the culture, like you got to be good at these things, right? Like you practice and test drive things.
Well, and what is good?
Yeah.
True. What's the standard?
So athletic and other things. Okay, but I mean, get rid of that. That's totally an
expectation.
Narrative, an expectation that is just hooey.
Yeah,
to put it lightly. To put it lightly.
I've never. So you guys are newly married. So what about for you guys?
Yeah,
I think looking back on it and thinking, wow, was it worth it to do that? Like 100%, there is not one doubt in my mind. I now, especially even being on this side of marriage, it's like absolutely, like I can say that from the core of my being.
30 years.
Right, you waited a long time.
Yeah.
30 years to kiss or have sex or any of that, really. And I think, wow, what a beautiful moment. Like the anticipation is so beautiful and the waiting is so beautiful. Instead of viewing that as negative, like, wow, look at all those years and now look who I get to experience this. And I can tell you there's nothing sweeter than saying, wow, I'm going to wait to share this with the man who has committed everything to me. We're entering into a covenant and he has chosen to give up everything else and to love me exclusively for the rest of his life. Like, that's the most romantic thing in the world, and he's not looking at me. You're not looking at me saying like, you have to be perfect. And I'm expecting like these moves, it's like, there's like you're saying like some acrobat. I don't know.
Yeah, what do you want from me?
Yeah. It was so sweet. And so like the innocence and beauty of it, I think is something that you just like, you can't compare. And so like 100%, absolutely no regret.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think? Was it worth it?
I mean, Yes, absolutely worth it. We've experienced so much value in our sexual relationship that that's really, especially as time goes on, even though we've only been married for several months. As time goes on, I'm finding that there is a sweetness that is actually growing. And that lines up with, neurological research. The more sex you have with one person, the more connected sex you're having with one person, the more your brain gets tied and starts to associate sex with that person. So sex outside of marriage, before the promise, before the covenant, is going to be totally different sex. Right? And especially if it's with different people. Because your body's trying to get tied to that, and then you're breaking that. And so your body is making promises, breaking promises, making promises, breaking promises. Now, if I was to have, sex with you before we got married, that would have been totally different sex than after we got married, because our bodies are making a promise. We haven't yet stood in front of each other and said, I will commit the rest of my life to you. And what we're experiencing is a heightened joy and a heightened sweetness as time goes on.
And we can even attest 8 years later, it just still gets sweeter. It really does, because I love what you're saying, that bond does grow deeper, and that promise of what we're committing to with our life and our bodies all reflect the same promise. So the final question to wrap it up that a lot of you have asked is, would we do anything differently going back? So if you could go back in time, would you change it? Would you do something differently? Maybe yes, maybe no.
That's a good question.
Yeah, but would you do anything differently?
More smooching in high school? Probably not. No, I wouldn't change a thing. I would even be more committed to it. I see it on this side, and the benefits and the value and the fact that God didn't lie to me. When he told me that this was good, on this side now, it's like, I would even be more passionate on that side. Like, I got to fight for this.
Yes, totally agree. That's a really good point.
Whereas other people were really helping me see the light and stuff, I'd be the first one to be like, no, I'm not doing it. So, no way.
I agree with that. I think the same thing. I would have been even more of an advocate. Like, this is so worth it. It's so awesome. If I could go back and have the knowledge I have now before I was married, I think I'd have that same perspective.
Totally.
Yeah. I think it's only complicated because there's just a lot of cultural narratives that are hooey. And that's honestly, I think, the one reason why we're even talking about this. It's been a given for, I think, for centuries in a lot of different cultures and ways. But the reality is, I would be, just like you're saying, I'm more of an advocate after I've experienced it. I had to be an advocate by faith for saving sex for marriage. Now I'm an advocate by experience.
Totally. I think that the only thing I would go back and do differently is really strive to gain even a more biblical perspective that would have penetrated my heart more, because I think when you're younger, you're like, okay, it can be a little bit more about the rules because you don't take the time to really strive to understand, why did God, this amazing good father, put these boundaries there for me. So I think if I could have better understood that as like an early single, late teen, whatever, I think that would have been even more helpful and given me just more of a gratefulness to God for creating this amazing, like creating sex and putting it within the context of marriage. I feel like I understood that a lot right before we got married, but I would have liked to understand that sooner.
It's really good.
Well, thank you so much, guys.
I know.
For being on here and for being on the channel with us and talking about some very...
It's my favorite topic.
Honestly, it's actually my favorite topic. I love talking about sex.
Well, everyone else wants to hear about it because we get so many questions about it, so I think we're going to have to do something like this again. But thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, definitely give us a thumbs up. If you want to see the guys back on here, comment below. Let them know. And if you want to see our videos on a more regular basis, definitely hit the subscribe button. And of course, support us on patreon.com. That's just a place. Yeah, it's huge, where you can help our channel to continue on, because as you know, there aren't a lot of channels like this, and so we need your support to keep this ad-free, commercial-free, and to help it continue on. So patreon.com/GirlDefined to help us keep going. And you can make different choices.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Why did you choose to jump back and forth? Okay. Wonderful, better than accepted. Expected. Okay, I'll do it real quick. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, again.